These 10 people are just a few among thousands. Wrongful convictions don't just take away freedom, they steal families, futures, and entire lives. We will uncover 10 times people were convicted wrongfully and had to sit in prison, although they were innocent. Starting off with Richard Phillips. He walked into prison in 1972. He walked out in 2018, and the world had changed beyond recognition. Richard Phillips spent 45 years in a Michigan prison for murder he didn't commit. He was convicted based on a false testimony from a man trying to reduce his own sentence. There was no physical evidence linking Phillips to the crime. He refused every plea deal over the decades, even when it meant staying locked up, because he didn't want to admit something he didn't do. He was let free only because the real killer confessed during a parole hearing. Phillips was released at the age of 72. He said, "I didn't do anything wrong. I just wanted to live free, and now I will." He now paints and sells his work, finally living the life stolen from him for nearly 5 decades.
In order to continue in life, no matter what problems you have to keep getting up. So I just kept getting up.
In 1989, 5 black and Latino teenagers, Yusuf Salam, Kevin Richardson, Raymond Santana, Corey Wise, and Antron McCray, were arrested for the rape and assault of a white woman in Central Park, New York. They were between 14 and 16 years old. No physical evidence connected them to the crime, but after hours of police interrogation, they confessed, terrified, alone, without lawyers or parents' presence. Years later, the real perpetrator confessed, and DNA confirmed it. The 5 were exonerated in 2002. Corey Wise spent the longest time in prison, 13 years. It's a haunting reminder of how race, media pressure, and fear can destroy lives. Their story was turned into the Netflix series When They See Us. So if you want to learn more about the story, you can do so by watching the show on Netflix. In 1985, Anthony Ray Hinton was arrested in Alabama for 2 murders he didn't commit. He was poor, black, and had a public defender who didn't believe in his innocence. The prosecution's only evidence? Bullets they claimed matched his mother's gold gun, a gun that hasn't been fired in years. Ballistics experts later proved the bullets didn't match at all, but it took 30 years, nearly 3 decades on death row, before the courts agreed to hear his appeal. He was finally released in 2015. In his words, "They had the wrong man, and for 30 years I lived in a cell the size of a bathroom for nothing." Today, Hinton is a public speaker and the author of The Sun Does Shine.
Not only did I lose my son, but the state took it upon themselves to create me out to be the worst person in the world.
Sabrina was just 17 years old when her infant son suddenly stopped breathing. She rushed him into the hospital, performed CPR, and tried everything to save him, but he didn't survive. But the bruises from her resuscitation attempts were mistaken for abuse. She was arrested and convicted of capital murder, accused of killing her own child. But the reality? Her son died of a genetic kidney condition, but it took 6 years, 2 trials, and endless appeals before she was cleared. Sabrina became the first woman in the US history exonerated from death row. She later said, "They didn't just take my child, they tried to take my life for it."
We as human beings have gotten so far away from what is right. It's all about politics and money. It's not about what's right.
In 1983, Archie Williams was wrongfully convicted of an attempted murder in Louisiana. There was no fingerprint match, no eyewitness who clearly identified him, and he had multiple alibis. Still, he was sentenced to life without parole. Thanks to the Innocence Project and new fingerprint technology, his name was cleared after 36 years in prison. In 2020, not too long after his release from prison, he stood on the stage of America's Got Talent, saying, "I watch that show every night in prison. I dreamed of singing there one day. That dream came true.
You're only waiting for this moment to be free.
His performance, powerful and heartbreaking, brought the judges to tears. In 1980, a robbery and murder happened in Dallas, Texas. The suspect was described as a black woman named Joyce. Joyce Ann Brown had an alibi. She was at work during the time of the crime. But because another woman used her name, Brown was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. After 9 years, investigative journalist efforts helped uncover the true story. The prosecution had withheld evidence and the real killer was eventually identified. Joyce was released in 1989. She later founded an organization to help other wrongfully convicted women, saying, "They stole my freedom, but they didn't kill my voice." In 1975, Ricky Jackson and 2 friends were convicted of murder in Cleveland, Ohio, based solely on the testimony of a 12-year-old boy. That boy later confessed decades later that he lied under police pressure. There was never any evidence linking Ricky to the crime. After 39 years, Ricky was finally released from prison, making him one of the longest serving wrongfully convicted individuals in American history. He said, "They took my best years, but I walked out of there with my dignity, and that's something they couldn't take."
And you got to get yourself together regardless of what the circumstances are, and you got to press forward. You know you're innocent, and you got to keep fighting,
At 18, Thomas Hainsworth was arrested in 1984 for multiple SAs in Virginia. Victims misidentified him, even though he looked similar to the real perpetrator, who continued attacking women while Hainsworth sat in prison. He served 27 years before DNA cleared his name. Even then, he had to fight another 2 years to be fully exonerated. He now works in the Virginia Attorney General's office, helping others fight wrongful convictions. 2 separate men in Mississippi, Levon Brooks and Kennedy Brewer, were both wrongfully convicted of the same kind of crime, the and murder of young girls. In the 1990s, both were convicted based on bite mark analysis, which had since been discredited. DNA later pointed to the real killer, a man who lived nearby and had struck again. Together, these 2 innocent men lost over 30 years of freedom. Levon died in 2018, shortly after release. Their story is told in the Netflix docu-series, The Innocence Files. Which case did shock you the most? Let me know in the comment section. See you in the next one.